Hotel staff of Reddit, how often do you catch people nude in the halls, and what's your best story? I was 19-year-old girl while working at this hotel. I've never seen a bare person in the hallway. But once in the lobby, a man at around 3 a.m. sat down on a chair and called his girlfriend. I was on the night shift, and I was sitting down behind a computer screen, so he would have only seen the top of my head if he looked over. But it was Sunday morning, and he was extremely drunk from a wedding. He was wearing a suit and I was just keeping my eye on him. He then started having raunchy phone call with his girlfriend or wife. And it was so raunchy. My jaw dropped, and I honestly didn't know what to do. Then a janitor came over, and we were sitting there flabbergasted. The guy then pulled his stick out and started playing. So I got up, walked over and said, "Sir, you're in the lobby." He woke up out of his drunken stupor and I'll never forget the look of horror that came across his face. He ran to his room so embarrassed. Story 2. I caught someone once. Well, I didn't have to catch them. They came to me. I worked night audit at a local hotel. One night/morning, around 5 a.m. I was at the desk when the elevators started moving. At the time we didn't have cameras, so I didn't know what to expect. When it stopped in the lobby, the doors opened, and I see a man with a cart, looking slightly shocked. Then from the blind spot from where I was standing, out stepped a man with a cigarette in hand, and nothing but a small towel around his waist. He looked pissed. He stormed up to the desk and demanded a new room key. All while yelling about how he got lost in the confusing as heck rooms. I confirmed his room, best I could, given the situation, and sent him on his way. The poor man that was in the elevator with him looked like he saw more than I did and didn't want to talk about it. An hour later, the man came down to the lobby to check out and demanded a full refund for embarrassing him and for not clearly labeling the balcony door and the hallway door. I laughed and told him to call my manager, which he did later that day. Kicker is, the room he was in had 2 doors. A bathroom door on one side of the room, and on the completely other side with a fire map, chain lock and deadbolt the room door. There was no balcony attached to his room. Story 3. I work for a very upscale trendy hotel, and after every shift, we get a detailed report from the front desk outlining every guest complaint or concern. We discuss the overnight report in the meeting each morning. This happened a little more than a year ago, but one evening, the overnight manager at the front desk, let's call him Bob, gets a visit from a very worried and scared guest in one of our top floors with a balcony. The guest says that he woke up to someone in his room and going through his stuff. When he turned on the light, the intruder rushed out via the balcony doors. The guest wants to call the police, so Bob decides to go back to the room with the guest and a security guard. The elevator doors open and 2 very bare and very high women stumble out asking Bob where they can score more drugs. Bob now has to handle the women and the scared guest and a potential intruder in the building. Bob decides to get the girls covered up with extra bellman's coats while he figures out what room they came from, and security goes up to the guest's room to check for intruders. Apparently, the intruder was a crackhead from the shelter down the block and was able to Spider-Man up the side of the building and up 7 stories. One of the girls jumps and sits on the front desk and proceeds to pee over the edge and onto the front desk's computers. The other passes out in the storage closet where we hold guest luggage. I love working here sometimes. Story 4. My uncle was the general manager of a resort up in Pennsylvania, and he told me a story about how a Little People convention came and had an event at the resort. The next day, the honeymoon suite was vacant again, so they rented it out to this newlywed couple. They weren't even in the room for 10 or 15 minutes before screaming was heard. Turns out, the night before, there were 3 midgets staying in that room, and they all got pretty trashed. So trashed that one of them got bare and the other 2 threw him up onto wardrobe cabinet. He didn't wake up to the cleaning lady, and so they thought the room was empty. The married couple screamed because they saw a pair of eyes peek up above the wardrobe as they were consummating the marriage. It's not every day you go on your honeymoon to find a bare midget above your wardrobe. Story 5. I used to work as an overnight auditor for a hotel. One day while I was doing rounds at 3 a.m., I thought I saw something moving at the opposite end of the hallway, and I was like, did I just see a bare man? This poor guy was sleepwalking in nothing, while hugging himself. Our hallways are freezing cold. I approached him closer and said, "Hello, sir." He turned his head and said, "Hey." I was like, is he still asleep? 5 seconds later, I guess he realized what was going on. He said, "I'm so sorry." I gave him a robe from a nearby housekeeping closet, took him to the lobby to verify his identity. Obviously, he doesn't have ID on him. I gave him a room key and followed him back to his room to make sure he doesn't sleep on his way back or whatever. Story 6. I used to work front desk at a hotel that once a year hosted a swingers convention. We would rent out the top floor rooms to them, and it was free for all. They all kept their doors open, and people would just run in nothing from one room to the next. We had cameras, so it was easy to watch all the running around. The problem would come in the morning. If they requested a newspaper, we would have to go up and deliver it to their door. Definitely saw many things. The worst thing with this was, when we had a long-term person who refused to move rooms when the convention was coming. So, in the middle of people running back and forth swapping, was a little old priest. We got calls that night from the swingers complaining someone was praying loudly. Story 7. Not my story, but my brother manages a nice hotel that happens to be near a red light district. One day, he gets this tourist who books a double room for a month, ideally as far away from the main entrance as possible. Guest checks in, and starting on the third day, there's this conga line of girls coming in and out of the guy's room. By my brother's own count, the guy's personal record is 16 different women in a day. That's not the crazy part. One day, guest comes to front desk with a woman on each arm and asks my brother if he could book an Uber. Brother obliges and books the guest an Uber. Guest then tips with a girl. As in, full-on offers the girl up to him and says, "You want to have a go?" I sincerely hope nobody ever takes a black light to that room. Story 8. I was working the morning shift one day and it was almost 3, so I was getting ready to leave. The business center was right in front of the front desk, across the lobby. I was counting money, and I looked up to see Big Booty Judy getting pounded out on one of the computers, and a guest with his stick out, going to town. I was in shock. Right then, my coworker walked in, and saw him too. She said, "Sir, this is a family hotel, get to your room now." Story 9. A guy somehow managed to lock himself out of his room in nothing and had to come to the front desk to get another key. The front desk is separated from the room since there are 5 buildings each with a certain number of rooms, and he was in the one furthest from the desk. So, he had to walk bare across the property. The saving grace was that it was around midnight, so no one was around. Also, I was sitting down, and the counter goes to around chest high, so I just thought he didn't have a shirt on until he was walking away, and I did a double take as I got a good look at his flabby bottom. Story 10. The case of Underwear Man and the Mysterious Bathroom Lady. I worked night audit at a hotel from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. On this night in particular, we had a group of Native American construction workers who were excavating a site nearby for fossils. Anyways, in the night shift you normally don't get anybody coming down, except to rummage through our little market for Oreos or other snacks. Well, around 2 a.m., I see someone standing in the market in just his inners. For context, the back office is next to the market, but you need a passcode to get through, and we have cameras back there, hence why I was able to see him. So, I open the door, and this guy looks completely out of it. Like 1,000-yard stare in just his inner. Weirdly enough, I don't smell weed or alcohol. He tells me he needs help getting into his room. That there's some crazy lady in there and he's afraid. I ask for some sort of ID to confirm if he's a guest. He tells me his name and other matching information. Sure enough, he's a guest in room 212. I make a copy of the key and then walk with him. But of course, I asked him about the lady because according to our files there's no one else in the room. He confirms with me that it's just him. He tells me that a while ago he went to get ice, in just his inners, and when he returned to his room he saw a lady in the bathroom. He tells me that she attacked him and locked him out. Naturally I'm calling BS on all this, but just in case, I got my cell phone ready to call 911. So, we take the elevator and then walk over to 212. The guest looks mildly uncomfortable, but I press on. The key card works, and we get inside. Immediately I check the bathroom while the guest hasn't even stepped foot in the room. I check everything and I see no sign that anybody forced themselves in here. The guest looks confused but shrugs it off. Weirdly enough, that was like a month into the job and this guest is a regular. I would see him most mornings and we never acknowledged what happened that night. Never acknowledged that I saw him in his inners or that he looked like he was on something. Just everyday "Good morning, Mr. M," and our conversations never went further than that. Story 11. I used to work security at a large casino/resort, and we got a call at around 3 a.m. one night about a bare and frantic woman running down the halls of one of our hotel towers. So, we go up there and sure enough, find a woman bawling her eyes out completely bare. We got her a towel from the linen closet, so she at least had something to cover up, and then she calmed down to tell us that she had met a guy on the casino floor, and went up to his room and he attempted to force her, and got all her clothes off, and scratched her up pretty good, but she fought like hell and got out of the room. Needless to say, The cops came, and the guy was dragged out and justice was served. Oh, he had a black eye when we got him out of the room too, she had hooped his butt. Story 12. I generally see at least one undressed person a month. To be fair, my hotel is in the nightclub area, so everyone is usually fairly intoxicated. I've had my elevator turn into a softcore corn studio on multiple occasions, but the one that always stands above the rest is one time this guy and a young lady. The elevator was still on the ground floor, and someone entered the lobby. After greeting the guest, I ran out the back to watch the security camera. This young lady walked in on the other two. He pulls his head out from under the girl's skirt, wipes his face and smiles. I'm rolling on the floor laughing my off. Another enjoyable one was this guy come to reception because he locked himself out of his room. He was completely bare. Normally people try to get my attention in some subtle way. The guy just walks down 4 flights of stairs, walks to the desk and casually says, "I left my key in my room." I hand him a new key and he goes to walk back up the stairs, sees a few girls looking at him from outside, gives them a wave and a pose, then proceeds back to his room. The level of "I don't give a crap" this guy had still impresses me. Story 13. Been working in hotels for about 5 years now and have a couple of goodies. 1. I was about 18 or 19, just starting out in the industry, and working the minibar. Part of my job was to check all the rooms to see if guests needed anything. So, I knocked on one door, just like I did every day, 3 loud knocks, but there was no answer. I went to walk in the room, and I see a man fully bare, handling another man, hard. The best thing about is, they were so in the moment that they didn't even notice me open the door. I took a step in and hurried out again. 2. I was working the night shift at reception when my duty manager, who was busy, asked me to do a floor check. I didn't mind, it was a good chance to stretch my legs. While making my rounds, I noticed the pool lights were still on and the door was open. The afternoon shift manager was supposed to lock it by 9 p.m. So, I decided to head in and I noticed a bare lady sitting the edge of the spa pool with a man, doing stuffs. I announced myself, and they quickly jumped back into the water. I suggested they continue their activities in their room and couldn't help but laugh as they awkwardly rode the lift back upstairs. Later, I told my manager, and we both had a good laugh about it. That footage is now proudly stored in the Golden Moments file of the security archives. There are so many more, but those are my 2 favorites. Story 14. I put myself through college working in hotels, spending a good chunk of that time on the graveyard shift. One year, we hosted an annual meeting for the new sales hires at Bear Paint. They were typically fresh out of college and full of themselves, acting like big shots just because they had a corporate credit card. They also pounded each other's brains out the entire week. One notable couple did it pretty much the entire night in one of our pool areas. I say area because over the course of the night they'd go from pool to deck chair, to hot tub, to pool deck, back to the pool, etc. I was mostly stuck behind the front desk, but periodically my graveyard security guy and graveyard engineer, maintenance guy, would pass through the lobby and give an update like, "They're in a chair," or "They're at the edge of the hot tub." But they weren't making any noise, and no one was complaining, so we didn't bother them. The more common wasn't necessarily seeing bare people, but the working girls. The pattern was pretty common. First we'd get a call or 2 asking for directions. This was the 90s before smartphones or even MapQuest for that matter. Then she'd ask to be connected to a room. Then the same woman would call asking where to park. Then a woman would walk to the lobby wearing a long coat, freshly done full hair and makeup at 2 a.m., and always carrying a big bag over her shoulder, and she'd ask where to find the same room number the caller asked to be connected to. Then at least 50% of the time, a guy would call from the same room asking where the ATM in the hotel was. Coincidentally, it was in the lobby with me, and either one or both of them would come down in robes or shorts and t-shirt. A bit later, the woman would leave with the same coat and big bag. But again, no calls or complaints, so I didn't give a crap. Let consenting adults have their fun. Story 15. Last night, I was doing the night shift at the front desk, usual boring night shift on my phone as usual. This guy appears out of nowhere, covering his jewels with one hand, holding his room card in the other. He screams at me for a good 5 minutes saying his card doesn't work and he got locked out and it's my fault. He had his phone in the same hand as the card. This guy didn't know that his phone demagnetized the card and that's why it's not working. I said something along the lines of, "Sir, you demagnetized the card with your phone." He apologized and I made him a new one. Happens once a month minimum. Edit. I'm working for a small hotel with low budget. We usually have the cheapest equipment, hence the cards that demagnetize themselves. Story 16. Not staff, but I stayed in a Sure Stay Plus, basically a Best Western branded motel, earlier this year when I flew to San Antonio to house hunt. I woke up in the middle of the night to the most god-awful shrieking ever. Opened my door, looked down the hallway, and saw what I will politely call a half-bare, no pants or inners on, plus-sized woman trying to squeeze out a crap onto the hallway carpet. I recoiled in horror and returned to the safety of my room. But the shrieking went on for what felt like an eternity. No less than 5 minutes of this Snorlax trying to push out a painful crap, right there in the hallway. I will never understand what could compel someone to just crap out in the hallway. But I really don't understand why someone would choose there, of all places, to meet their constipation head-on. I asked the front desk if that was normal, and they said yes. Still can't believe it. Story 17. Maybe once every couple of months. I work at a more business-centered property, so it's mostly tame. But sometimes we do wedding blocks. One time I got called at maybe 1:30 a.m. to fix a bathtub after a big wedding party came back, most of them pretty blasted. I knocked and a guy answered in his boxers, with his wife passed out drunk in the tub. He invited me in to fix it with her still in it. She's drunk, she doesn't care. I respectfully covered my eyes while trying to get the plug to work. Not an easy task. Another time, I had to kick some people out of the spa and everyone was giving me lip, except the one guy who was bare, who jumped right out and showed me his tiny pecker. I added, and if we could make sure we have pants on too, that'd be great. I wish there was more casual scenes at my hotel because we can all have a laugh about that, but more of what I see is people coming back at 2:30 covered in their own puke, which is just depressing. And gross. Story 18. Not me but my mum, she works as a night shift manager. After all the guests had checked in for the evening, she got a call from one asking her to send the pizza guy up to his room once he arrives because he's already cozy in bed. My mum refused as it's against policy to send people up and told the guy he had to come and collect the pizza himself. The guy was irritated, yelled, and then hung up. My mum went to go do her usual rounds along the floors and as she was walking down the hall, she caught the guy running from his room fully unclothed and heard his girlfriend laughing hysterically from their room. Story 19. I was working as a manager at a budget hotel chain when I was younger, and my executive housekeeper came into my office to tell me a guest, who was supposed to check out today, was still in the room at 3 p.m. This is pretty standard. People try to push their checkout time when they can. I was working on something, so I sent the front office manager to check it out. He came back down a few minutes later and said, "She answered the door in nothing and that room smells like crap, you're up." At this point, I was a little hesitant to go to the room and it was nearing 4 p.m. so I called the police to help me evict this guest. When the police officer arrived, we knocked on the door but didn't get an answer, so I used my master key to get in. The smell was indescribable. Absolutely disgusting. We found the guest laying in the center of the bed absolutely screwed out of her mind on something. She had poop smeared on her body and on some of the sheets. The police officer started asking her pretty basic questions like, "What is your name? And where is your ID?" But she couldn't answer any of them. She just laid there staring at us while rubbing her bare, poop-covered body. The police officer threw her some clothes and tried to get her to dress, but she refused. While all of this was going on, I was standing in the doorway trying to figure out how the hell the room smelled so bad when all I could see was a small amount of poop smeared on her. My staff were watching from the elevator banks, and they were telling me they could smell it from down there. At this point, the police officer decided to call the EMT because this woman was entirely incoherent and wouldn't answer a damn thing we asked her. He finally managed to find her ID through some of her stuff. After he'd looked around the room and called an EMT, he looked at me and said, "We have to look in the bathroom now." I had figured out that the smell was coming from the bathroom by this point and just vigorously shook my head at the guy. I asked if I could leave, and he said he needed a witness in the room with him. This was before body cams, so I had to stay. That bathroom was my worst nightmare. Poop was everywhere. Smeared on every single surface. It looked like someone's bottom had exploded in that tiny bathroom. The smell was indescribable, but if I really think about it, I swear I can still smell it. The EMTs showed up a bit later, wrapped her in a sheet and put her on a gurney all while singing "Let It Go" from Frozen. My boss paid 2 housekeepers an extra $20 each to clean the bathroom, and I went home and showered for over an hour. Story 20. Not me but a friend of mine has worked front desk at a hotel for a few years. One time a guy came in pretty late at night, asking for a room where a working girl was staying. After about an hour or so, my friend sees the guy running out into the lobby fully bare, holding his hand over his jewels. My friend keeps telling him he needs to put some clothes on, or leave the lobby because he cannot be there in nothing. He then starts acting frantic saying he needs a key for room, whatever number, and my friend keeps telling him he can't have a key to a room that isn't under his name. He keeps getting aggressive saying he has to have a key because the stupid girl kicked him out and he needs his clothes back. Anyway, he got so aggressive and over the top that they ended up having to call the cops, and my friend got to watch this bear man explain to cops that he pissed off a hooker and she won't let him get his clothes back at 2 a.m. Story 21. I'm not a hotel worker. I was in Vegas for my best friend's bachelor party, staying at a strip resort. We flew in on a 7 a.m. flight, and my brilliant friends started pounding double bourbons on the way there. After a full day of drinking on next to no sleep, the bachelor himself ended up way too drunk. While watching a March Madness game, he started yelling obscenities at the players and pretty much everyone else in the room. We decided to take him back to his room for a power nap so he could rally for the night ahead. 2 hours later, I got a call from hotel security. Apparently, my friend got lost on his way to the bathroom, managed to lock himself out of his room, and ended up hiding naked in the stairwell. The real twist, though, the reason hotel security was even looking for him, was that our trip coincided with a massive cheerleading convention or competition. Everywhere you looked, there were groups of fully decked out, pageant-ready kids running around. Apparently, the bachelor had a run-in with a mother-daughter duo outside his room, completely buck naked. They accused him of something indecent, though I highly doubt it. He was probably just trying to relieve himself in the hallway. So, my night quickly turned into a 2-hour ordeal of convincing hotel security not to press some kind of SA charges against my friend. Thankfully, being a lawyer, I knew how to navigate the situation and talk them down. After that, I had to scramble to find him a new hotel for the rest of the trip. He does not like it when we bring this story up. Story 22. This happened years ago when I was working as a bellman at a hotel during college. One of my duties was handling do-outs, which meant making sure guests who had checked out had actually left their rooms, and marking whether the rooms were clean or dirty. I'd typically do this around 1 p.m., 2 hours after checkout time, though the list is printed at checkout. One day, a business-looking man walks in and checks into a room on a walk-in basis, no reservation, around noon. This detail becomes important in a minute. So, I'm going through the list, and the procedure is to knock on the door twice, announce yourself, and if there's no answer, use the master key to enter and check for signs that the guest hasn't left, like shoes, luggage, or other personal items. I walk up to a room that was marked vacant on the list, do my 2 knocks and announce. No answer. I enter per procedure only to see the businessman from earlier in the day doing it with what I assume to be a mistress or perhaps a working girl. We all make awkward eye contact, but they do not stop. I quickly turn around, say sorry and leave. I ran downstairs to tell my manager about what I had just seen, and he told me not to worry about it. It happens all the time. The guest never made a complaint, so I just moved on with my day. Story 23. I was staying at a hotel in Sydney for business back in 2016. It was 4 a.m., and I kept hearing someone walking up and down the hallway, trying to open doors. Footsteps echoed, and I could hear door handles jiggling. It was pretty freaky. After they made the rounds and came to jiggle my door handle for the second time, I decided to open the door, armed with nothing but my deadly Asian fists, ready to confront what I assumed was a junkie. To my surprise, I opened the door and saw, no joke, a hot young redhead, completely bare, scurrying off to the next door. At 4 a.m., I heard someone in the hallway, so I opened my door to find a young woman, barely covering herself with her hands. "Hey," I said, inevitably freaking her out. She spun around and stammered, oh my God, I'm just looking for my room. This is so embarrassing." She frantically backed away around the nearest corner. She didn't seem aggressive or high, just completely panicked. Trying to appear as non-threatening as possible, I quickly grabbed a towel from inside, threw it to her, and she thanked me profusely as she wrapped it around herself. She then continued to knock on the door directly across from me, insisting it was her room. She wouldn't accept my offer to stay in my room, so I asked, "Can I call the front desk for you?" To which she immediately responded, "No." I was left dumbstruck, half asleep, and not wanting to push further, so I left it at that. A few minutes later, I heard the lift, then the sound of a room door opening, and there was no sign of her. It wasn't until 5 a.m. that I finally managed to sleep. The next morning, I told the receptionist about the encounter. She checked the security log, trying not to laugh, and told me the girl had been taken care of. To this day, I have no idea who the naked hallway elf was, but I'm just glad I didn't read about her in the news. Story 24. I once worked in a hotel as a receptionist. I came in one morning, and the night shift guy pulled me aside and told me, "You need to see this." He showed me the camera footage from the elevator lobby from the night before, which showed a mid-50s balding man in a suit with a small blonde woman half his age. They were being playful one moment, and then the next she was giving him a full-on BJ right in front of the elevator doors. The best part was, he then went to try and stop them, but you can see on the camera that they heard him coming and ducked around the bend in the hallway, still in full view of the camera and pressed up against the wall like he was in a stealth video game. The night shift guy came into the lobby, looked around lazily, then went back to the office, at which point they went right back out into the middle of the hall and started it all again. This happened like 3 more times before the night shift guy caught on that they were hiding. Story 25. I worked as a night manager at a hotel, and 2 stories stand out. The most embarrassing one was when a guy, completely drunk, woke up and sleepwalked into the hallway, fully bare. Unfortunately, the door to his room locked automatically behind him. He woke up in the hallway without a key and had to come down to the reception, still unclothed, to ask for help. Naturally, I gave him the most understanding look I could muster and quickly followed him to unlock his door. It must have been the most embarrassing moment of that poor guy's life. Another night, I got a complaint about loud noises coming from a room, so I went to check. It turned out to be a small party. When I knocked, I heard one of the guys say, "Let's see what happens if I open the door and nothing." He opened it, standing there with a hard-on stick, while 2 ladies, both in their 50s, stood behind him, fully clothed. I looked him dead in the eye and before he could say anything I said, "Sorry my man, but that little thing doesn't scare me. And ladies," I turned to them, "it honestly isn't anything to get so excited about. Please keep it down." The ladies burst into laughter, and the guy just silently shut the door. Story 26. A few years ago, when I was about 23, I worked at a hotel that reserved 16 rooms each night for local pilots and flight attendants. One night as I was walking down the hall, I saw a completely bare guy walking away from me. I grabbed a towel, rushed down the hall, and tried to hand it to him. He slurred, asking what the towel was for. I told him he wasn't wearing anything and he denied it, so I pointed out, "Look down." He looked, said "Oh," and took the towel. I figured he was just really drunk. He was so out of it that he thought he was in Hawaii and that someone was trying to steal his truck. I walked him to the front desk to look up his room, but when I searched his name didn't come up. After about 5 minutes of searching, I realized this guy was a pilot, and his room was actually booked under the airline's name. His story was that he had a cold, took some NyQuil, then went to the vending machine without his key or his pants. I've seen the security footage, and my reaction was priceless. I just wish I had a copy. Story 27. I am an unlucky, unclothed guest. Here's my tale. My spouse and I went to Austin to visit family a week or so after Hurricane Katrina. Very few rooms were available anywhere. The place we stayed at didn't have staff between 1 and 6. I had to go pee at about 2 a.m. and missed the bathroom door for the room door. I woke to the sound of the door closing behind me. I knew 2 things. 1, I'm about to piss myself, and 2, I'm unclothed. I cover my front and back and go searching for a place to relieve myself. Let me sidebar with the fact my spouse sleeps like the dead. There is nothing to wake her up, especially in the middle of the night. This was pre-kids. I'm on the 3rd floor, running, looking for a public restroom. I find only one unlocked door, and it is a trash room that is gross and smells like the whole floor's discarded dinner takeout. I decided to go to the lobby, find the stairs and head down. Now the stair exit is directly across from the front desk and adjacent on my left to the main entrance. 2 things are clear when I get to that door and peer through the little window. There is no front desk staff, and the lobby is dark/closed. I could go outside to relieve, but I don't believe that I could get back in without a room key. Not worth that risk. I head back to the trusty 3rd floor trash room and have an epic pee in one of the 55-gallon trash cans. Now that I can think straight, I formulate my plan to get back in my room. I proceed to start knocking and calling her name. After 20 minutes, I'm punching the door and leaving little bloody reminders of this embarrassing hell. The spouse doesn't wake, but a few residents do and threaten to call the police. Hard pass. Without a better option, I resigned to go back to the trash room. I sat on that cold, smelly, sticky floor for hours. I kept peeking out to look for any signs of sunrise. When the moment came, I knew I could go downstairs and plead my case with the front desk attendant. There wasn't anyone between me and the stairs. So, I head down to the first and look out the little window. Didn't expect to see a lobby completely full of folks just bust in from New Orleans. Not gonna lie, I hesitated. I told myself, screw it, It's either go out there in all your glory or you live in the trash room now. That group of hurricane refugees parted like the Red Sea as my 6-foot-tall white, bare self strode out calm as you please. At this point, why cover and look ashamed? The desk clerk asked for my ID, and I offered to spread my cheeks, got a few chuckles from some Chappelle fans in the audience. She smiled awkwardly and just gave me a key. My spouse didn't wake until I'd already showered, dressed, and woke her up with this thrilling tale. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.